Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. We're tackling a topic suggested by the Fundamental Foundations Counseling Center in Little Elm, Texas.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, and we're picking up where we left off in our exploration of anxiety and neurodivergence.
Sounds fascinating.
Yeah, it is. Last time we kind of laid the groundwork, definitions and things like that. But this time we're really going to dive into the deeper waters of this connection.
Okay, great.
So you know how these two areas, anxiety and neurodivergence, they kind of intersect and they influence each other?
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing how those two things really do go together.
Right. It's like they're intertwined in understanding that connection. It's so important for providing effective support.
Absolutely. It's not just about, managing symptoms. It's about getting down to the root causes and how can we create an environment that is more inclusive and supportive.
Okay, so let's unpack that overlap a bit more. We know that neurodivergent individuals often experience anxiety differently. But why is that? What is it that makes this intersection so unique?
Well, think about it this way. The neurodivergent brain, it processes information and interacts with the world in a way that's distinct from what we consider neurotypical.
Okay.
And this can create challenges and stressors that contribute to anxiety.
So it's not just about individual sensitivities, but about how the brain itself, perceives and responds to the environment.
Exactly. For example, many autistic individuals have really heightened sensory sensitivities. So a crowded, noisy environment that a neurotypical person might just find, bustling,
Right.
could feel completely overwhelming to someone with those sensory processing differences.
It's almost like their sensory input dial is turned up way higher.
Yes.
So everyday stimuli can become almost unbearable.
Yeah, that's a great analogy.
Oh, yeah.
And imagine navigating that heightened sensory input every day, all day long.
Right.
It's understandable why anxiety often becomes a constant companion.
It's like trying to have a conversation in a room with like 10 jackhammers going off.
Yes, exactly.
You'd be on edge all the time.
All the time. And it's not limited to just sound. We're talking sights, smells, textures, tastes. Any sensory input can become overwhelming
Depending on the person.
depending on the individual's sensory profile.
And it's not just sensory sensitivities, right?
Yeah.
We also talked about how executive functioning challenges like those often seen with ADHD can also play a big role in anxiety.
Absolutely. Executive function.
Mm.
Those are crucial skills like planning, organization, time management, impulse control.
Right.
Difficulties in those areas can create a constant sense of overwhelm and pressure.
Especially in a world that demands those skills constantly.
Exactly. So imagine struggling to keep track of deadlines or feeling overwhelmed by that to-do list or just constantly battling those impulsive urges. It's like trying to juggle a dozen balls while riding a unicycle.
Right.
It's bound to lead to some anxiety.
Yeah. You're going to drop a couple balls at least.
At least.
And so we're talking about internal factors, like how the brain processes information and regulates emotions. But external factors play a huge role too, right?
Absolutely. Societal expectations and a lack of understanding can create immense pressure for neurodivergent individuals to conform to norms that really just don't align with their neurology.
It's like we're constantly telling them to fit into a square hole when they're clearly a round peg.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that constant pressure to mask or suppress their natural way of being, that can lead to significant anxiety and emotional distress.
So it's this combination of internal and external factors, this interplay between the neurodivergent brain and a world that isn't always very accommodating.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to approach anxiety in the context of neurodivergence with this deeper understanding of these unique challenges.
Okay, so we've established that anxiety can show up in different ways in neurodivergent individuals.
Yeah.
Let's talk about how we can actually recognize it. Is it always obvious? Like, is someone going to say, hey, I feel anxious?
Not always.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's more about noticing those subtle shifts in behavior or understanding how anxiety might be expressed a bit differently.
So what kind of signs should we be looking for?
We talked about stimming earlier. It's a self-regulating behavior that we often see in autistic individuals.
Right.
Things like hand flapping or rocking or repetitive movements.
Yeah.
These can be a way of managing anxiety and sensory overload.
Okay, so rather than seeing those behaviors as a problem, we should recognize that they're actually coping mechanisms.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's about understanding what is the function behind the behavior.
Yeah.
So instead of just trying to suppress it, we can explore ways to support that individual's need for sensory regulation.
Yeah, that's a really important point.
Yeah,
It's about meeting people where they are and understanding their unique ways of coping.
absolutely. And sometimes anxiety might show up as meltdowns or shutdowns.
Yeah.
These are intense emotional responses.
Right.
They can be overwhelming for the individual and those around them.
Sure, I can imagine that would be really challenging for everyone involved.
Yes. But again, it's about recognizing those responses as expressions of anxiety, not intentional misbehavior.
Mm.
Meltdowns and shutdowns often are a sign that their coping mechanisms have just been overwhelmed.
Right.
So instead of just viewing them as bad behavior, we need to understand that underlying anxiety and how can we create a more supportive environment.
So we're talking about shifting our perspective,
Exactly.
moving away from judgment and toward understanding and empathy.
Exactly. And that shift in perspective is crucial for providing effective support. When we can recognize the unique ways that anxiety shows up in neurodivergent individuals, then we can tailor our responses and interventions to their specific needs.
That makes so much sense. It's about seeing the individual behind the behavior and responding with compassion and understanding.
And that understanding is the foundation for building trust and creating a safe space for these individuals to manage their anxiety and thrive.
So we've explored the why, the how you know of anxiety in the context of neurodivergence. Now let's move to the practical side. What are some effective coping strategies that can help neurodivergent individuals manage anxiety?
That's a great question. And this is where things get really interesting. We have a whole toolkit of strategies from sensory regulation to mindfulness to building a supportive network.
Right.
But I think it's important to emphasize there's no one-size-fits-all approach.
Right, of course.
What works for one individual may not work for another, and that's okay.
So it's about finding what works best for each person,
Exactly.
taking into account their unique needs and preferences.
Yes. And that's where collaboration and communication is so important.
Right.
Working together with the individual or their families and support systems to create that personalized plan.
That makes a lot of sense.
Right.
So where do we begin? What's the first tool in our anxiety-busting toolkit?
Well, let's start with sensory regulation. It's all about understanding the person's sensory profile and creating an environment that minimizes sensory overload and promotes calm.
Okay.
So, think back to our discussion about those sensory sensitivities.
Yeah.
For someone who's easily overwhelmed by noise,
Yeah.
providing noise-canceling headphones or creating a quiet corner can make a huge difference. Right? It's like giving them a way to control their sensory input. Like turn down the volume on the world when it gets to be too much.
Exactly. And for someone who craves deep pressure touch, a weighted blanket or even a firm hug can provide that grounding and a sense of calm.
Yeah, I've heard so much about weighted blankets. They seem to be really popular. Do they really work? I mean, what's the science behind them?
So the deep pressure touch that weighted blankets provide,
Yeah.
that's thought to actually stimulate the release of endorphins,
Really?
those feel-good chemicals in our brain.
Interesting.
It's like a gentle hug that signals safety and security to the nervous system.
So it's not just a fad. There's actual scientific evidence that supports this.
There is.
Right.
While more research is needed to fully understand those mechanisms,
Right.
anecdotal evidence and the experience of many individuals suggest that weighted blankets can be so helpful for managing anxiety, particularly for those with sensory processing differences.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Yes.
I'm learning so much already.
So it's about finding the sensory tools that work for the individual and incorporating them into their everyday routine.
Exactly. And it's not just about mitigating those negative sensory experiences,
Okay.
but it's also about incorporating those positive sensory experiences.
What do you mean by that?
Well, think about the activities that engage the senses in a calming and enjoyable way. For someone who loves the feeling of water,
Yeah.
taking a warm bath or swimming could be very soothing.
Right. It's like finding those things, those sensory things that bring joy and peace.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The key is to be creative and to experiment and just find what works best for each individual.
Right.
It's a journey of discovery.
Yeah.
And it can be very empowering for individuals to gain that control over their sensory environment.
I like that. So sensory regulation is about understanding,
Yes.
mitigating, and embracing those sensory experiences to create a more balanced and calming environment.
Exactly. It's about giving the individual the tools to manage their sensory input.
Right.
So they can navigate the world a bit easier with a little less anxiety.
It's about empowering people to feel more in control of their own experiences.
Exactly. And that sense of control is so important when it comes to managing anxiety.
So we've unpacked sensory regulation.
Mm-hmm.
What's next?
Let's move on to mindfulness and relaxation techniques.
Okay.
These practices can be really powerful for regulating emotions and calming the nervous system,
Yeah.
especially for neurodivergent individuals who might find those traditional relaxation techniques a bit challenging.
So are we talking about things like meditation and deep breathing?
Those are certainly a part of the toolkit, but it's important to approach mindfulness in a way that is accessible and engaging. Like
Okay.
for someone who finds traditional medication difficult,
Yeah.
focusing on a repetitive action like knitting or drawing can have that similar calming effect.
So it's finding those mindful moments within everyday activities.
Exactly. And guided imagery can be helpful for individuals who respond well to those visual cues. So instead of just trying to clear their mind, they can focus on visualizing a peaceful scene or maybe a favorite place.
Right. Like a mental escape hatch.
Yes, that's a great way to think about it.
Yeah.
And technology can play a helpful role here.
Okay.
There are lots of apps and online resources
Mhm.
that offer guided meditations that are specifically designed for neurodivergent individuals.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah.
An app could be a really accessible way to incorporate meaningfulness into someone's daily life.
Absolutely.
And speaking of accessibility, I've heard that routines and predictability can be really helpful for managing anxiety, especially for neurodivergent individuals. Why is that?
Well, imagine living in a world that feels unpredictable and chaotic.
Yeah.
You're constantly bombarded by these unexpected changes and demands.
That sounds exhausting.
It is.
Yeah.
For many neurodivergent individuals, that comfort of routine and knowing what to expect that can significantly reduce their anxiety.
It's creating a sense of order and control in a world that can often feel overwhelming.
Exactly. And it doesn't have to be anything complicated. Simple things like having a consistent morning routine
Right.
or using visual schedules can make a huge difference.
I love the idea of visual schedules. Instead of just telling someone what's going to happen, you show them with pictures or symbols.
Yes.
It makes that sequence of events so clear and reduces anxiety about the unknown.
Exactly. Visual schedules can be really helpful for children, but they can also be helpful for adults.
Oh, interesting.
Think about using a whiteboard or a planner to map out your day or your week.
Right?
It creates a sense of structure
Yeah.
and reduces that anxiety about what's coming next.
It's like giving your brain a roadmap
Yes.
so it doesn't have to constantly worry about getting lost.
Yes. And don't underestimate the power of checklists.
Oh, I love checklists.
They can be lifesavers for anyone who feels overwhelmed by those tasks or deadlines.
I know I'm a big checklist person too. They help me stay organized and reduce that feeling of where do I even begin?
Exactly. And they can be especially helpful for individuals who struggle with executive functioning.
Right.
Breaking down those tasks into smaller, more manageable steps
Right.
can make them less daunting and reduce anxiety about getting started.
So it's about creating a sense of predictability and structure in the physical environment and in daily routines.
Exactly. And that predictability can be incredibly empowering,
Yeah.
especially for those who might feel like they're constantly at the mercy of a world that doesn't always understand their needs.
Okay, so we've got sensory regulation, mindfulness, and routines in our toolkit. What other strategies should we consider?
Let's talk about cognitive behavioral techniques, or CBT.
Okay.
This is often recommended for anxiety, but does it work the same way for people who are neurodivergent?
That's a great question. Yeah. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that.
You know, traditional CBT may need some adjustments,
Okay.
but the core principles are still so valuable. It's about recognizing those negative thought patterns that fuel anxiety and learning how to reframe them in a more positive or realistic light.
So instead of getting caught in that spiral of what ifs
Yeah.
and, catastrophic thinking, we're helping individuals challenge those thoughts and come up with more balanced perspectives.
Exactly. And it's important to approach CBT in a way that's tailored to the individual's needs and their strengths.
Okay.
Visual aids can be so helpful for individuals who process information visually.
Right.
So instead of simply talking about thoughts and feelings,
Right.
we can use diagrams, charts, even drawings to make those concepts more concrete and accessible.
Yeah, it's like giving the brain a visual map of those thought patterns so it can actually see how they're connected and how to change them.
That's a great way to put it. And another key aspect of CBT is gradual exposure.
Okay.
It's about facing those situations that provoke anxiety, but in a very controlled and supportive way.
So instead of just throwing someone in the deep end, we're helping them wade in slowly and build up that confidence in those coping skills along the way.
Exactly. For example, if someone has social anxiety,
Yeah.
you wouldn't throw them into a crowded party right away.
Right.
You might start by practicing conversations with a trusted friend or a family member,
Okay.
and then gradually building up to those larger groups or more challenging social situations.
Makes sense.
So the idea is to build that confidence over time.
Yeah, take those baby steps and celebrate each victory along the way.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that progress isn't always linear.
Right.
There will be setbacks, and that's okay.
Yeah.
It's about learning from those setbacks, adjusting the plan, and continuing to move forward.
So it's about patience, persistence, and recognizing that everyone's journey is different.
Absolutely. And that brings us to our next strategy, social and emotional learning. This is so important for neurodivergent individuals who might find social interactions to be challenging.
I'm really interested in this.
Yeah.
What exactly does social and emotional learning involve?
It's about teaching individuals the skills they need to navigate social situations with more confidence and ease.
Okay.
This might include recognizing and understanding emotions both in themselves and in others,
Uh-huh.
developing those effective communication skills, and just learning how to manage conflict.
It's like giving them a toolkit to decode the often very confusing world of social interactions.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And it's not just about teaching those specific skills, it's also about fostering self-awareness and self-acceptance.
Right, helping people understand their unique strengths and challenges,
Yes,
and embracing their neurodiversity as a part of who they are.
exactly. And that self-acceptance is crucial for building resilience and managing that anxiety in social situations.
It's recognizing that being different isn't a deficit,
Yes.
it's strength.
It is. And it's about celebrating those differences and creating a world where everyone feels valued and included.
Okay, so we've covered sensory regulation, mindfulness, routines, CBT, and social and emotional learning. What else is in our anxiety-busting toolkit?
Let's talk about accommodations and advocacy.
Okay.
This is about recognizing that neurodivergent individuals might need different supports and strategies to thrive in a world that wasn't really designed with their needs in mind.
So creating a more inclusive and equitable environment.
Exactly. Accommodations might include things like flexible deadlines, sensory breaks,
Right.
or assistive technology.
Right.
And advocacy is about speaking up for those accommodations, for yourself and for others.
Right.
It's about educating others about neurodiversity,
Yeah.
challenging misconceptions,
Yeah.
and advocating for change.
So creating a world where they don't have to constantly mask or suppress who they are to fit in.
Exactly. It's about creating a world where everyone can be their authentic selves
Right,
and
right.
thrive.
I love that vision.
Good.
It's about embracing diversity in all its forms and creating a more just and equitable society for everyone.
It is, and it starts with small steps. Each of us can make a difference by educating ourselves about neurodiversity, challenging our own biases,
Yeah.
and advocating for change in our spheres of influence.
Yeah. That's a powerful reminder that change really does start with each of us.
It does. And that brings us to our final strategy, building a support network.
The power of connection.
Yes.
I'm guessing this is especially important for people who might feel isolated because of their neurodiversity.
Absolutely. Connecting with others who share similar experiences can be incredibly validating and empowering. Support groups,
Yeah.
whether in person or online, offer a safe space to share struggles, to celebrate victories, and to learn from each other.
It's about knowing you're not alone.
Exactly. And online communities can be so helpful for those who might find those in-person interactions challenging.
Right.
They offer a way to connect from the comfort of their own homes.
Yeah, it's amazing how technology can bridge those gaps and create a sense of belonging even from afar.
It is. And finding those connections can make all the difference in managing anxiety and navigating the challenges of neurodivergence.
So we've covered a lot here. Sensory regulation to building a support network.
That's a lot.
It's a pretty comprehensive toolkit of strategies for managing anxiety in the context of neurodivergence.
It is. And it's important to remember this is just the beginning.
Right.
There's so much more to explore and discover.
This deep dive is about sparking curiosity and empowering people to take that next step in their journey.
And to remind everyone listening that managing anxiety is a process, not a destination.
Yeah.
There will be ups and downs, but with the right support and strategies, neurodivergent individuals can not only manage their anxiety, but they can thrive.
Absolutely. And that's what this is all about, empowering individuals to live their best lives, embracing neurodiversity as a source of strength and resilience.
Beautifully said.
Well, we've covered a lot in this first part of our deep dive.
We have.
I think it's time to take a breath.
Yes.
Let our listeners process all this amazing information.
A pause for reflection is always a good idea.
We'll be back soon to continue our exploration of anxiety and neurodivergence. Stay tuned.
See you then.
Take control of your mental health with our membership program. Enjoy priority scheduling, session rollovers, and in-office and virtual appointments when you need them. Fundamental Foundations Counseling Center offers affordable plans tailored to your needs because your wellness matters. Visit fundamentalfoundcounseling.com to join today.
And we are back, ready to kind of continue our deep dive into anxiety and neurodivergence.
Yeah, I'm excited to pick up where we left off. I feel like we covered a lot of ground.
We did!
But there's still so much more to explore.
There is. We've talked about recognizing those unique ways anxiety kind of manifests in neurodivergent individuals.
Right.
And we explored that range of coping strategies
Right.
from sensory regulation to mindfulness to social and emotional learning.
It's really fascinating how all those pieces fit together.
It is like a puzzle.
It is. It's like a really complex puzzle.
It is a puzzle worth solving
Yeah.
because understanding this intersection of anxiety and neurodivergence
Yeah,
is crucial for creating that more supportive and inclusive world.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that bigger picture. What does it actually mean to create a truly neurodiversity affirming environment?
You know, it's about moving beyond just managing those symptoms,
Oh,
and getting down to those root causes.
Okay.
It's about challenging those societal expectations
Yeah.
that often create so many barriers. Yeah.
For neurodivergent individuals.
So instead of trying to like fit those square pegs into round holes, we need to just reshape the world to embrace those differences.
That is a great way to put it. It's about recognizing that neurodiversity isn't a deficit.
Right.
It's just a different way of thinking and
Right.
experiencing the world.
And that different way of thinking and experiencing the world, I mean, it can bring so much value and creativity
Absolutely.
to our society.
Think about all the incredible innovations and
Yeah.
advancements
Yes.
that have come from neurodivergent minds.
Right. It's about recognizing the strengths that come with neurodiversity.
Yes.
And creating spaces where those strengths can flourish.
Exactly. And, it starts with education.
Uh,
The more we understand about neurodiversity,
yeah.
the more we can challenge those outdated notions of what's normal.
It's like unlearning those old scripts
Yes.
and embracing a more inclusive and accepting mindset.
Right. And it's about listening to those neurodivergent voices.
Yeah.
Believing their lived experiences and
Uh-huh.
amplifying their perspective.
Right. Giving them a seat at the table.
Exactly.
Valuing their contributions.
It is. And it's also about advocating for systemic change.
Right.
Pushing for those policies and practices
Right.
that really support neurodiversity
Yeah.
in all areas of life.
From education to employment to healthcare.
Everywhere.
Yeah, we
Right.
need to create a world where neurodivergent individuals have those equal opportunities to thrive.
And that world starts with each of us.
Yeah.
It starts with those small acts of kindness and understanding.
Like offering a sensory break to a colleague who's feeling overwhelmed,
Yeah.
or using those visual aids
Yes.
to communicate with a child who processes information visually.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Even those small actions
Yeah.
can have a ripple effect
Right.
in creating a more inclusive and welcoming environment.
It's about shifting the paradigm from tolerance to acceptance.
Yes.
From seeing differences as deficits to celebrating them as strengths. And that shift in perspective is crucial for creating a world where everyone feels seen, heard, and valued.
I love that vision.
Good.
It's a world where neurodiversity isn't something that we just accommodate,
Right.
but something that we embrace and celebrate.
Exactly. And it's a world worth striving for because when we create a society that values neurodiversity,
Yeah.
we all benefit.
We gain new perspectives, new ways of
That's-
thinking, new
uh-huh.
solutions to problems.
It's like adding a splash of color to
Yeah.
a black and white world.
I love that.
It enriches our lives
In so many ways.
in countless ways.
Yeah, so let's talk about how can we take this vision and actually translate it into action.
What starts with awareness?
Okay.
The more we educate ourselves
Right.
about neurodiversity, the more likely we are to recognize and challenge those biases and assumptions.
Right. We all have those unconscious biases
We do.
that shape how we perceive things and how we interact with the world.
Absolutely.
It's about being mindful of those biases
Yes.
and actively working to dismantle them.
And it's about seeking out information from those reputable sources,
Yeah.
listening to the voices of neurodivergent individuals and organizations,
Right.
and just staying informed
Right.
about the latest research and advancements in the field.
Yeah, it's a continual learning process
It is.
and one that requires humility,
Yes.
and a willingness to challenge our own perspective.
Then once we've laid that foundation of awareness,
Yeah.
we can start to take action in our
Huh.
own spheres of influence.
So that can mean advocating for accommodations in the workplace,
Yes.
creating sensory-friendly spaces in our homes,
Exactly.
or just having open and honest conversations with friends and family about neurodiversity.
Those are great examples. Every action, no matter how small,
Okay.
can contribute to creating a more inclusive and accepting world.
Yeah, it's about recognizing that we all have a role to play
We do.
in this collective effort.
It is. And it's also about remembering that change doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah.
It's a journey,
Yeah.
not a destination.
But it's a journey worth taking,
It is.
because that destination is a world where everyone can thrive,
Exactly.
regardless of their neurology.
Beautifully said. And I think that brings us to our final thoughts for our listeners today.
Oh, okay. I'm ready. What thought-provoking question do you have for us?
Here it is. How can you use your unique skills, talents, and passions to create a more neurodiversity-affirming world?
That's a good one.
It is.
It's a reminder that we all have something to contribute.
We do.
And that change really starts with each of us embracing our own neurodiversity
Yes.
and using our voices
Yes.
to advocate for others.
It doesn't have to be these big, grandiose gestures.
Right.
It can be those small acts of kindness,
Yeah.
understanding, and support.
Like offering a listening ear to a friend who's struggling,
Yes.
advocating for accommodations at your workplace,
Right.
or even just educating yourself about neurodiversity.
Those are all great.
Yeah.
Every action, no matter how small, can create those ripples of change.
And those ripples can eventually turn into waves,
Can't.
transforming our society into a more inclusive and equitable place for everyone.
I love that imagery. It's a reminder that even small actions can have a profound impact.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And that brings us to the end of part 2 of our deep dive into anxiety and neurodivergence.
It has been such an insightful conversation.
I know we've covered so much,
A lot.
but there's still more to come.
There is. We'll be back soon for part 3.
Yes.
Where we'll delve into some practical tips and resources for supporting neurodivergent individuals and
Right.
creating a more neurodiversity affirming world.
Awesome. Stay tuned for the final installment of our deep dive. We're back for the final part of our deep dive, exploring anxiety and neurodivergence.
I know, it's been great.
I feel like we've learned so much.
You too.
But we've been talking about the unique challenges that neurodivergent individuals face and all the different strategies they can use, to manage their anxiety and really thrive.
Right.
And we've talked about, how to create a world that is more inclusive and really embraces neurodiversity.
Yeah.
But, sometimes even when you have those coping strategies
Yes.
and those great support systems, sometimes people just need a little bit more.
Absolutely. And there's no shame in that.
Right.
Seeking that professional support,
Right.
that's a sign of strength.
Absolutely.
It's a sign of self-awareness.
It's like recognizing that you need a guide to help you through a really challenging part,
Yeah.
on a trail or something.
Yes, a great analogy. And finding that, right? Mental health professional, someone who understands neurodiversity
Yeah.
can be transformative.
Right. It's about finding someone who sees your neurodiversity not as a problem, to fix,
Right.
but it's just a different way of being.
Exactly. Someone who can meet you where you are and help you develop those personalized strategies
Yeah.
to manage anxiety and to navigate this world that's not always accommodating.
So if you're feeling overwhelmed,
Yeah.
like you're hitting a wall, don't hesitate to reach out
Yes.
for support.
Absolutely. There
Yeah.
are so many great therapists and counselors and psychiatrists
Yes.
who specialize in working with neurodivergent individuals.
And they can provide a really safe and supportive space.
Yeah.
For you to explore your experiences and develop coping skills and really work towards a greater sense of well-being.
Absolutely. And remember, managing anxiety.
Yes.
It's a journey.
Yes.
It's not a destination.
It's about progress, not perfection.
Absolutely.
And with the right support and resources, neurodivergent individuals can not only manage their anxiety, but they can thrive.
Yes.
Well, to our listener at the Fundamental Foundations Counseling Center in Little Elm, Texas, and to all of our listeners out there tuning in,
Yes.
we hope that this deep dive has been helpful and informative and maybe even inspiring.
Absolutely. It's been an honor to share this knowledge with you.
And remember, creating a more inclusive and understanding world really starts with each of us.
It does embrace those beautiful neurodivergent minds.
Keep asking questions, keep learning, and keep diving deep.
Until next time.